production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by
the Bartlett Area Chamber of Commerce and its member company, Ewing Kessler Incorporated, providing mechanical and building control solutions for sustainable, energy-efficient building performance. This privately owned regional company is committed to relationships and service responsive to clients' needs. Learn more at ewingkessler.com and ekautomation.com.
The WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Mayor Jim Strickland, tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes, publisher of the Memphis Daily News. Thanks for joining us. And I am joined tonight by Jim Strickland, Mayor of Memphis. Thanks for being here.
Well, thanks for having me.
Along with Bill Dries, senior reporter with the Memphis Daily News. So you've been in about 45 days. I guess I haven't seen you since you were inaugurated. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Everything has been calm, gone to script, no surprises in this 45 days, just everything's under control.
I wish I could say that, but there's just challenges every single day. And things that we really need to get a hold of. I mean, frankly, violent crime has been way too high for the first month and a half.
Yeah, we'll get into police directors and body cams and all that, but just a general question before we start digging in more. What's been most unexpected, or one of the most unexpected things? I mean, no one is really exactly prepared to be mayor because you can't be mayor before, really. So one of or some of the most unexpected things? The
time crunch. On my schedule every single day. It's just one thing after another. So you really have to work hard to block out time to actually work.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't want to just meet. So my rule of thumb at the office is I want 2 hours plus lunch where I'm not meeting with anyone.
Yeah.
Per day. And sometimes it's hard to because emergencies come up and you have to do a meeting here or there. But so I'm evolving on that calendar challenge.
Yeah. Well, you talked about violent crime. I mean, there's a lot going on within crime and the police department and so on. Let's start with the police director. You have your interim police director, Tony Armstrong, retired. There's a national search. Talk about the search and your goals for that search and how long it'll take.
We're about to sign a contract with the company doing the search. It's a national association of police officers. That's not the exact name of it, but it's the equivalent of the American Bar Association for police. And we'll sign that contract. I think by mid-year, we'll have somebody permanent. People in Memphis are welcome to apply or across the country. What I'm looking for is a strong leader who's committed every single day to try to drop that crime rate, who's committed to community policing and data-driven policing, and someone who can rally our officers behind a united goal.
Are you looking for someone who, people use the term too much, but change agent? Do you need change or radical change in the police department? Is that what needs to happen?
No, I'm not going to set that as the goal. No, I just need a strong leader. I don't think necessarily that person has to change everything, because that person knows more about policing than I do. I just want to be committed to the concepts of community policing and data-driven policing, which is Blue Cross.
Yeah.
But I'll leave the change how they operate up to them.
Bill.
Have you looked at what other cities have done? Because law enforcement seems to go pretty consistently from one model to another. I think we've been through in recent years the broken windows phase where that's deemed to be really important. How much of a role are national trends in this search? Or is Memphis unique from that?
Well, the national trend that I was more focused on realizing is that many police departments now, when they hire a director or chief, sign a contract, a multi-year contract, and the pay is much higher than what we're paying right now. That's kind of the trend that struck me the most. As far as national trends, there's this whole debate going on nationally about the quote Ferguson effect, and whether that's depressing police action or not. And I'm no expert on that. I just know the debate's going on.
And will you do a contract?
I think the market requires a contract.
Which we've never done before. And a much greater salaries in the range of?
$250.
Yeah. which the prior director was making.
Like 130. We've raised it on an interim basis to 150.
Okay, Bill.
So how does that work in terms of getting council approval? Does the council then approve a contract for 3 or 4 years in that?
To be honest with you, I don't know. They certainly would have to approve the appointment and the salary. And inherent in that, I think, would be an approval of the contract. So, but I think from talking to the council early on, they realize that we have to bump up the salary. That most people realize that our police salary is not at market.
Well, that then put pressure on salaries for the officers on the street.
Well, we don't know. That's a whole separate issue, though, and we are doing a study on salaries for firefighters and police officers because, as you know, we've lost more than our fair share of those over the last couple of years. So we want to get a handle on our entire pay package, from paid time off to the drop plan to salary to benefits, and compare ourselves to our sister cities and see where we stack up.
Well, how long will that take?
Well, we're expecting it literally any day now.
Okay, and that'll be shared with the union, that'll be shared with the police, the council, and so on?
Yeah, because I use too many sports analogies, but one of the ones I like is I'm the new college football coach, and when I'm brought into the school, I have to recruit my current players to stay, and I need to recruit our current police officers to stay, because a few years ago, we had roughly 2,400.
Right.
We're down to 2,080 or so right now.
And how was your relationship with Mike Williams? Mike Williams, who the head of the police union, took time off to run for mayor. You did many forums and debates with him. You butted heads on some things. I mean, as a city councilman, you voted for some of these cuts and benefit cuts. How is your relationship with Mike Williams, or have you even seen him?
Well, I've seen him. It's always been very professional. I got to know him a little bit more on the campaign trail than I knew him before. I respect him, and he allowed me in November to come address his leadership at the Union Hall. We're going to come back this month and have just an open, frank discussion.
Yeah, body cameras. Mayor Wharton, prior administration, announced with great, announcement in the summer, fall. We're going to get body cameras. It's a trend. We talk about national trends throughout the country. Then it had to slow down. Amy Wyrick, the district attorney, raised some red flags on this show in November about her office and how they're going to handle it. You then delayed it. Why did the rollout of body cameras have to be delayed, and how long will that take?
Well, first of all, it's very clear. Before I took office, the body cams were never implemented. Okay. So it's not just Jim Strickland who's delayed the implementation of body cams. We inherited a situation that had not been thoroughly vetted. The DA's office was not involved in the initial discussions, but we have two basic big issues. The city government has the issue of what to do with open records request, because just like police document, a police written police report is a public record that y'all are welcome to get, or the public. All that videotape is open public record. And let me give you an example. We have dash cams now. Cameras in police cars, 150 police cars, that go out the front window and into the back seat. They're only on 150 cars, and they've only been implemented in October, November, and December of last year. Well, and they continue, but 3 months of last year. Over 10,000 hours of videotape in 150 cars. And then the dash cam cars are going to increase by 150 cars per year. And then body cams. There's no other city that's having such a big rollout of video cameras. Now, we're going to get this done. I support body cams. I voted for it. So we have that challenge on our side where we need some more personnel to be able to handle the open records request. Then the DA's office has a personnel problem. They need 15 to 30 employees to deal with not public records request, but defense counsel has the right to be able to see video. Then you have to prepare the video for court, hearings, trials, and so forth.
When we had Amy Wyrick on, it really blew my mind, because I'm guilty of not having thought this through, and she raised the issue. It's on the website back in November, but she talked about, I think it's Seattle, that they have 35 people who just go through the video every day, and they have to be proactive in terms of going through it. I'll turn this back to Bill and say, who's going to pay for all these people?
You are.
Thanks, Jim.
The taxpayers of Memphis.
But how is that? I mean, what's it going to cost?
Well, we're going to make a presentation next week to council on costs. We're going to touch on costs. But, when you talk about the in-car videos, then the actual body cam videos and the storage, We're talking millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Then
It
you
hasn't
have,
been allocated.
well, actually, most of that has been allocated because we've already bought the equipment. But then we have $4 million at a minimum for storage over the next few years. And then we have the additional personnel on our side. And we're prepared to hire, we think initially 10 or so people, initially.
Okay.
But what the challenge is going to be if Citizen A or television station B shows up and says, I want the video, the body cam video and car video of Officer Jim Strickland for the entire month of January. That's I mean, it's an open record. And we have timelines on how we're supposed to respond to those open records. We got to abide by the law. So, we just got to do it. And I know some people, I think most people in Memphis understand the problem. I know a very small minority is worried about implementing. We're going to get this done.
Yeah. Okay. Bill.
As this is all happening, you're putting together a budget to present to the Memphis City Council in April. You said last week when you were before the council committee updating them on this that you're going to find some of the money in the current police budget for this fiscal year, which has about 4 months left in it. So how much wiggle room do you have, so to speak, in basically rearranging the existing budget?
For the next 4 months, I think there's enough wiggle room. Now, I can't quantify it, but I think it's enough wiggle room that we can get 10 more employees to work. The challenge is, what do we do after that? And it's a bigger challenge than just these 10 employees, if I can talk about those challenges. We have roughly a $650 million budget. Over the next couple of years, we have to come up with $10 to $20 million to fully fund our pension. This is per year. And we have to come up with another $10 to $20 million to hire additional police officers. A net increase of 250 officers is going to cost $14 million. So $650 million we start with, 10 to 20 for pensions, 10 or 20 for extra police officers. That's a lot of money for an economy that's not growing. And I very much do not want to raise taxes. So that's our challenge. I do not know how I solve that challenge. And it's probably not going to be solved in this coming up budget, but that over the next few years, that's what our challenge is.
Well, can you make a gradual start on it? And I'll use the example of the salary of the next police director, which you want to bump up. Can you hire the police director that you want and say, we're going to get to $250,000 a year, but we're going to get to it gradually and get who you want?
Well, I think we're not going to be able to come up with their salary gradually. I'm going to have to fully budget that in 1 year. But $100,000 more than what we're paying now is a challenge, but it's not nearly the millions of dollar challenge for new police officers. Now, the new police officers are going to be, I can't hire 250 new police officers over the next year. That's going to be a gradual bump up. And the pension buildup is going to be a gradual buildup. Obviously, I can't pay $20 million for the next year. And, we got lucky on the short term on our ARC, our annual required contribution for the pension. It traditionally has been about $75 million. It was lowered down to $58 million because it's smoothed or averaged over a 5-year period. We dropped off a bad year and picked up a good year investment-wise. So it dropped it down to 58. But as anybody, I'm no stock market analyst, but I know the last 6 months or so has been really bad. So next year, my thought is it's going to bump back up to 70 million.
Is the idea or the temptation, I might say, of trying to do the ARC over 2 years as opposed to the 5-year swing, I take it that's gone out the window, or is it still a possibility?
No, I'd like to pay it off sooner than later, because as we learned from the Siegel Consulting Group, which was the council's pension analyst last year, they told us for every year we don't pay it, we incur $2 to $3 million extra per year. It's basically interest. Until you fully fund it, you're catching up. So the quicker we fully fund it, the better, and that's my goal.
And it just one more point on the budget that you're putting together. It sounds as if to avoid a property tax hike, we're talking about some major rearrangement of priorities for the city in this first full fiscal year that you're going to have.
Maybe. I don't know. I can't confirm that right now. But, I mean, my priorities are pretty clear. It's cleaning up the city, crime, blight, litter, doing the basics like paving streets. You know, a very small example is, you know, before I got in, I'm not going to fund the music commission. Things like that, the extras, even though they may be doing a good job, those extras have to go by the wayside because we have to fund the basics.
So I assume you're not budgeting for Shelby County Schools OPEB liability. The state attorney general came down with an opinion, not a ruling, but an opinion asked for by a county commissioner that OPEB liability for what were the former Memphis City schools transferred to the new Shelby County schools may be the responsibility of Memphis. Do you see it that way?
Well, he did say that.
Okay. He opened the door to it. He opened some people's door to it.
Yes, some people. No, I don't think it said that at all. And I've read the statute that he was talking about. It does not say the city of Memphis is responsible for it. And there's two basic points that people need to understand. Memphis city government and the Memphis city schools were two separate entities. The only thing we had in common was the name Memphis and the fact that we contributed about 7% of their budget.
Yeah.
So to leapfrog and say, well, you contributed 7% of their budget, you're 100% responsible for their OPEB, is not logical.
Do you see this being a distraction? Is it something where you're going to have to get lawyers and fight this and it's going to be...
Frankly, I'm not distracted at all by it. We're not contributing to it, and we're moving on with the basics of city government.
You mentioned the economy growing, not growing. The Edge Board, the pilot incentives, you know, a lot of time spent on this show talking about it. Was big in the campaign. People I think like Mike Williams saying, that's just a giveaway. It's a tax giveaway to big business and so on. The Edge Board is contemplating some changes that involve minority business contracting and requirements or incentives or how they can get more minority-owned businesses, more locally owned minority-owned businesses involved with some of these big projects or medium projects that the Edge Board funds or supports through pilots. What's your take on that? You are involved with that in the sense that you appoint some of the people on the Edge Board, correct?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and the executive director reports, I guess, to me and the county mayor. If I may, let's broaden that discussion because minority contracting is very important,
right?
And we have to increase it, frankly, for the survival of Memphis. Demographics, you don't have to be an expert to realize that the vast majority of Memphians are African American, and if we don't increase the business opportunities for small businesses owned by African Americans, we're really cutting off our nose to in spite our face, or whatever that saying is.
Yeah.
So there's three areas I see. First of all, the one I can control the most is how city government contracts out for goods and services to city government. We're going to increase that number. The last time they measured it, it was about 14% for African American owned and women owned businesses. That's too low. We're dedicated to increasing that. We're about to announce the reorganization of the office and the hiring of somebody in charge. Secondly, we need private business to follow the lead of us.
Yeah.
And that's where you really make the difference. Because if small businesses relied on city government for all their work, we don't spend enough. So we need to lead by example and encourage the business community. And the chamber says they're committed. And then third is the pilots.
Yeah.
I prefer a carrot approach as opposed to a stick approach. I said that in the debate. I think, in fact, your all's debate here, where you give extra incentives to those who meet those requirements. But I'd like to have this debate more defined by the facts. And the facts that I need to know are, what do other cities do? Let's just use Atlanta, for example. They obviously have been pretty successful at growing minority-owned businesses. How do they involve minority-owned businesses in their tax incentives? Because you also have to not only learn from other cities, we're competing with the other cities. So you don't want to make barriers to job growth that other cities aren't doing.
Yeah.
That puts us at a competitive disadvantage.
So then a company that comes in here and gets a pilot agreement, there would be a provision in there, I think the way this works, that if you meet such and such a percentage at this level or a higher percentage, then you get more of a percentage in terms of your tax abatement, or are there other incentives that could...
That's my initial thought, is that maybe you get an extra year or so on your tax abatement. But that's an uneducated opinion. I really needed to say first that I want to see what the facts are. Lay it out. How do other cities do it? Because we are competing against other cities and we can learn from other cities. So I'd like to know that first before but the carrot approach seems to me to make more sense than the stick approach, like a clawback, a punishment, because my guess is there's not any other cities that claw back for that reason.
What do you do? I mean, we've got about 5 minutes left. So what do you do in a city that, I mean, and this isn't your problem, but what do you do as mayor? What can you do as mayor? That there's very small number of, percentage-wise, of minority-owned, women-owned businesses in Memphis. Daryl Cobbins has talked passionately about it. Carolyn Hardy, the current, head of the Memphis Chamber, the president of it. What can you do, again, separate from contracting, what can you do to support an environment that has more women and minority-owned businesses?
You shoved across contracting. I'm going to pull that back.
Okay.
We need more companies who are certified minority-owned businesses. We don't have enough that are certified for city government contracts. There's many more businesses out there that are certified, and we got to figure out why. I think part of the reason is because doing business with government is very frustrating. The commission that oversees our contracting came up with several recommendations, and you can read their recommendations over the years, and you get very frustrated because they literally say, well, we made these recommendations several years ago and it's still not being done. Yeah, would you please do it? The biggest example was pay your bills on time. I was a small business owner. I had a small firm. It's hard for small firms to wait 120 days to get paid. We got to pay our bills quicker. We got to make it easier to be qualified. We got to go out and recruit businesses to get certified so that they can contract. I like the idea a county commissioner came up with. Why don't county government, city government, MLG&W, the airport all get together and have one certification project?
Because then you're talking billions then. I mean,
right.
In spending. Look, not to interrupt you, but with just 4 or 5 minutes left here. You mentioned blight. You mentioned it throughout the campaign. You mentioned it before. That it is one of your priorities. How does that play out in terms of spending, in terms of initiatives, in terms of blight and cleanup and everything?
I don't have all those answers right now, but it will be a priority in the budget. We have to do a better job, obviously. We have actually measured now how many pieces of property in Memphis are blighted. And I went to the announcement a couple Saturdays ago. It was roughly 9,000 or so lots, residential, commercial, empty lots. So once you measure something, then I can hold myself accountable. That number needs to go down, and my team knows that we need to bring that. Right. And how do you do it? We're still pursuing our residential pilot, which was a tax incentive program that we're thought of because I copied it from Cleveland, Ohio, where if somebody moves into a blighted area, they don't pay property taxes for X years. We're still trying to figure out if it's legal. We do have a bill up in Nashville pending in case we need to pull the trigger on that. We have to reduce the amount of time it takes for the city and county to foreclose on a property that doesn't pay taxes. Right. It takes 5 years now. We've been talking about that for years. We need state legislative help on that. And then for the city budget, we got to really prioritize just basic things like cutting the grass. And then we have virtually no city money devoted to picking up litter. Really? Clean Memphis has a budget like 200, not Clean Memphis, that's the private one. Right. Memphis City Beautiful is about $250,000. There's a private organization, Clean Memphis, that does a good job. But we got to put more money in a better effort picking up litter.
Bill.
And also there are, that kind of brings us to the question of code enforcement as well. And the council made some strides when you were on it to actually reach in and fund more code enforcement officers. Right. Do we still have enough in that respect?
I don't know yet. My gut wants to say no, we don't have enough. But I need to do a good job as the chief administrative officer of the city to make sure we're being efficient. And the answer to everything isn't just more people and more people and more people, because we don't have enough money for that. We got to do more with less. So right now we're going through the evaluation process of evaluating, are we very efficient in all areas of government? And that's one of them.
Do you think that code enforcement is pointed aggressively enough in the direction of apartment complexes? And I'll go ahead here and talk about Pepper Tree, as well as the Warren and Tulane apartments, which are about to have all of their tenants basically move out.
Well, I've just learned this since I was mayor, that I knew beforehand that the city handles residential code. The county handles commercial code. For a while, this is what I've just learned, for a while, the apartments kind of fell in between and no one was paying that much attention to it. Are they residential or commercial? They're taxed as commercial property, but obviously they're residential. And the city kind of picked up on that fairly recently, and I don't know if that's a year or 2 years or 6 months. So we're just now kind of getting into more code enforcement in apartments, and we need to do a better job.
So did it fall on the city side or the county?
Well, I don't know, but the city voluntarily,
Yeah.
I don't know legally whose side it is, but the city stepped forward.
How was the State of the Union?
It was great.
Just a couple seconds.
I'd never been to Washington, D.C.
No way.
So this was a Mr. Smith Goes to Washington type of thing.
Wow,
I
well,
loved
that's
it.
a pretty good first trip.
Yes, I loved
All
it.
right.
It was great.
Thank you for being. We'll have you
Thank
back.
you.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you for joining us. Join us again next week.
Support for Behind the Headlines is provided in part by the Bartlett Area Chamber of Commerce and its member company, Ewing Kessler Incorporated, providing mechanical and building control solutions for sustainable, energy-efficient building performance. This privately owned regional company is committed to relationships and service responsive to clients' needs. Learn more at ewingkessler.com and ekautomation.com.